I really love the idea of like beginner's mind, just which I don't have a great definition of it, but it is that thing of like you're experiencing something both exciting in that it's new and scary that it's new. Um, and you're also experiencing yourself experiencing it. And I think that's an important thing of like if you want to try something new, just know that you will be experiencing yourself in trying something new.
Welcome to the Funny in Failure podcast, a podcast that celebrates failure and shines the light on the emotional side of comedy with yours truly, Michael Kahan.
Today's guest is brilliant. Brian is open, vulnerable, compassionate, and empathetic. The chat is a nice deep dive. I always appreciate when my guests are able to meet me at the table and share in such an uplifting and positive manner. I walked out of this chat feeling refreshed, confident, and a little bit wiser. So let's get into it and officially introduce today's guest. Brian Huskey is an actor, comedian, and writer who has over 175 acting credits to date. On television, he's had memorable reoccurring roles as Chet, the oddball paramedic on Adult Swim's Children's Hospital, Leon West, the bitter and cutting journalist on Veep, Victor, the unhinged husband to Natasha Leggero in Another Period, and he was also a series regular on People of Earth, playing the paranoid sad sack Richard Shultz. Brian has also voiced numerous characters for animation, including the fan favourite Regular Sized Rudy on Fox's Bob's Burgers. Brian has also written 2 feature films for Paramount Pictures, Comedy Central's Kroll Show, and earned an Emmy nomination for his work on Comedy Central's Night of Too Many Stars and Adult Swim's Children's Hospital. He has also starred in and co-wrote the original fully improvised film A Better You, and he's also created, wrote, and starred in 2 comic television specials for Adult Swim, Mr. Neighbor's House and Mr. Neighbor's House 2. The list keeps on going on, and some of his other credits include This Is the End, Neighbours, Neighbours 2, The Disaster Artist, Stepbrothers, Land of the Lost, Semi-Pro, The X-Files, New Girl, Beavis and Butthead, and Central, just to name a few. So as you can imagine, we dive deep and we cover a lot, such as his previous life as a photographer and being in a band, the benefits of improv, divorce, mindfulness, the highs and lows of showbiz, the stories we tell ourselves, Al-Anon, empathy, collaboration, and the flow state. Before we get into this chat, in case you aren't aware, the videos are now available on YouTube under Michael Kahan. That's Kahan with a K, unless you're listening to it already. I find it adds a new element and dynamic to these chats. I'll still be posting snippets of these chats on Instagram under Funny and Failure, so check them out if you want to stay in the loop for upcoming episodes, or you want to ask a guest a question. I'd also love it if you would share the podcast or share your takeaways from the chat. It really motivates me, helps the podcast grow, and ensures I can lock in amazing guests like this one. And just as a final reminder, the podcast comes out every Monday at 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, with the video to follow the following day. Anyway, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's epic episode. What is the best photo you've ever taken? The one that you look at and you're like, this is the greatest creation in the entire world. You marvel at its beauty and you just cannot believe that you managed to capture it. Does anything spring to mind?
It's so so there's the ones that I like and then the ones that people like. For me, my favorite picture that I think I've taken ever, for whatever reason, is a shopping cart in Griffith Park, no, in Elysian Park, that had a really decrepit potted plant in it.
Interesting.
And I don't know what, yeah, I don't know. I went through a period where I took a lot of pictures of shopping carts that are just abandoned. And maybe it was sort of where I was emotionally or whatever. But there was something about this picture that I just was like, it still kind of has all this weird resonance for me, all this kind of like it just speaks to me. I don't know why. And I, I've shared it with other people like, yeah, that's okay. What am I looking at? I'm like, you'll see the same thing.
Well, it's the way that we connect to the art. So
yeah. And I don't know. I can't answer that as far as like another favorite one. That's the first one that pops to mind. I would say maybe because I was really proud of it, just this one I did in college that everyone kind of reacted to. And that was important for me because it gave me some momentum that I needed, like for myself.
Yep.
You know what I mean? That it was that kind of like affirmation, or a little bit of sort of like, go ahead, continue to do this.
That you're on the right path and that you can actually do this.
That it's, that it's that maybe I'm curious about it, but also that curiosity is translating into an expression, into something that other people can react to, unlike my shopping cart plant picture.
Was the shopping cart during your time at college, or was this afterwards?
No, that was here in Los Angeles. Yeah. Yeah.
And I like how what do you think in particular makes you resonate so much? I know you're talking about like where you were maybe emotionally, but it's still something that you think of to this day. So there's obviously like this deep meaning that you can connect to in terms of this photo.
I mean, if anything, it does embody how I see Los Angeles, which I think is a shambling mess of a former star rambling down the street. It really is like, it's falling apart. And I would never choose to live here. I sort of moved here for work.
Yep.
So I've moved here for work to be sent to other cities to work, basically, most often. But I don't know what it is about. I'm not a big, I like seasons. It has 1.5 seasons here, basically. And over the time I've been here, it's just sort of, homelessness issues have gotten worse, and the infrastructure is kind of decayed, and the sort of social class expanse has widened more and more. So I just got back from Vancouver, and I have such a crush on Vancouver.
How nice is it? It's beautiful.
Oh my God. So I'm trying not to compare my lovers, but
it's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, my Canadian girlfriend's much hotter.
Would you consider moving to Vancouver? Because there's still work there.
Yes.
Oh,
no, my girlfriend came out to visit me while I was there, and we were like looking into immigration, like how to kind of move up there. Can you just buy a property? Does that give you some kind of status?
Wow.
I was talking to my daughter. I was like, you should check out University of British Columbia, because we were on that campus shooting, and it's beautiful, and the city's amazing. And I am going to try to take her up there sometime to try to
convince her. Oh, that's so exciting. Because
just,
you're not the first person to tell me like LA's just the base to be able to move to different places. It's kind of hilarious in that regard. I know that do other people that in your circle see it that way? Because it's really funny to me that it's just kind of the base. It's not the place that you necessarily want to be, but you kind of have to be there in a sense.
I think so. I mean, I also, I was in New York for 10 years before I moved here, and that was a place that I enjoyed my time there, but I was getting to the point where I was like, this is hard. This is a hard place to live. I'm not wealthy. I don't know what I'm getting. I can order food at 2 a.m. and have it delivered, but is that worth all this kind of other stuff that I'm wallowing in? And that's a little bit how I feel here. There's amenities, but the quality of life isn't offset enough. And the consistency, I'd say if the consistency of my work was, more day to day, I don't know how much I would be noticing it, because I would be engaged, so it's that kind of, you have time to kind of look around and be like, oh, okay, this is not great. So I don't know if to answer your question. Yeah, I have a few friends, but most of my friends, I feel like, have sort of, they seem to be to sort of not reconcile. I don't know. They just accept that that's where they need to be, and they're going to make the best of it.
Because we were talking off air about like self-taping. There's always that. Obviously, it's better if you can do it in person. But with self-taping, that would open up opportunities as well, like to move to Vancouver, for example. Is that also why you're considering the move?
I mean, really, and considering the move is just kind of like uh, entertaining a fantasy or entertaining the possibility.
Yep.
But that is a reality. That is the kind of thing where I don't have to be here. I can self-tape wherever. So yeah, but the other, I think the thing that I would be, knowing how I am, I might sort of feel like, well, if I'm not there in it, I might be forgotten. And there is a little, I mean, honestly, there is a little bit of thing. There's a thing like you run into people and they remember you, and then you get a call to audition for something or to work. So, and my career is not such that I'm like Jeff Bridges, where I can go live on a ranch and everybody's like picks up the Jeff Bridges phone and direct line to him, So it's kind of like, well, what the quality of life that I want for myself, my family, and then can that be, in part of my quality of life is supported by how much work I get. So it's
an interesting balance. I hope that you get the best of all worlds, but it is kind of, everyone here is hoping as well. In terms, it's so nice because
listeners like, I'm not.
Yeah, it's like, fuck Vancouver. Vancouver's very similar to Melbourne where I am, so it's very similar. But it is kind of like crazy.
Yeah.
I've heard about, no one can really understand it unless you're in the entertainment industry, about that concept of literally bumping into someone and that can then provide a job opportunity, because it is different, as you said.
Yeah.
And I just find that kind of like mind blowing that you can just bump into someone like, oh, I forgot about you. Do you want to do this audition?
Yeah.
And I know that's somewhat at least happened to you a few times. So can you speak to that? Because regular people like myself don't quite comprehend this. I've just heard it enough where it still blows my mind.
Well, my girlfriend pointed it out to me because with pandemic, we were locked down a lot and wouldn't go out. And so when we started to kind of venture out, she was like, every single time we have gone out, you've run into at least 3 people that know crazy. You. And she's like, and they're all like, you worked with them on this or that and stuff. And I think the first payoff of that is just, for me, it's a little bit of a reflection back to like, oh, yes, I exist, or this career I have exists. It's not sort of like erased because there are gaps between work. There's a continuity to it. There's like a timeline to it.
Yeah.
And I can't remember specifically, but there's definitely some times where I would like run into someone and then like, cool. And then like a couple of weeks later, I get a call to audition for their show or, that kind of thing.
Amazing. Yeah. It is. It's really, it's interesting what you say, because this is also an industry where people are always like, they're always thinking about like the next job, and there's the worry of what's my like next job going to be. But when you look at your resume, for example, and I hope you do, because you have, I think, over 175 credits, which is probably the most we've had on the entire podcast. And we've had some.
Yeah, I win.
You do. You screw everyone else. That is a crazy number. Like I'm sure like when you're like really reflecting, that is just an incredible number. But also at the same time, you're probably working way less than you've got more time free than you're working. That's just the nature of the industry. And that could also be a bit of like a mind fuck, because you look at like, let's just say I used to be an accountant. So you look at an accountant and you see they're working like Monday to Friday. And I'm sure that's also been a bit hard looking at that, because you're looking at everyone else is working and you're not actually working yet. You've actually worked a lot. So are you in a better place about that? Is that something you think about?
It goes in and out, honestly. There's a little bit of, Like when I moved to Los Angeles, the timing was a little crazy because we moved here, bought a house. I was supporting my ex at the time through grad school. We had just had a child, and then the writer's strike happened, and then everything went away. And then it was a little bit of sort of like clawing back to getting work and stuff when I returned. And I just was in this mindset where I was like, nothing's happening. I don't ever work. And she's like, I want you to go and write down all the jobs you've done in the past 2 years. And I want you to sort of show me that. And doing that reminded me of, yes, that I worked a lot. I think for me, a sense of like safety and security is kind of my ism a little bit. That's I go to a fear place around sort of like financial stability sometimes. Yep. And that particular event of having the housing market crash right after we bought this house and then no work, and literally I was doing a commercial campaign for this company, and I had some movies in the pipeline that all went away. So it was that kind of like the bottom dropped out. So for me, a lot of jobs can be seen as, at my best, can be seen as I've been working consistently for 23 years, consistently. Mm. The other version is I've been getting these little jobs for 23 years and only a couple of sustained, structured, budgetable paychecks, and I think that sort of points to, that's all about my sort of perspective on it, and I know that when I get in kind of a fear space, my perspective is very lacking, and that it's chaotic, and that it's, that there's big gaps between the work. And then when I'm in place of acceptance and even pride, I'm like, oh my God, it just keeps happening, and I have to remind myself that keeps happening because I'm good at it, and people seem to like to work with me and stuff. So
you've obviously done a lot of work on yourself to be able to like shift the mindset, because it's a lot easier said than done, especially the money's not here, I'm not working, what do I do?
Yeah.
Has that been a constant thing that you've been focusing on? And are you able to shift more easily out of those mindsets into a more, let's say, positive one?
Are you asking, has been getting to that place where I can sort of toggle between? That is honestly the result of doing some program work. I know you've talked a lot, you've alluded to that you've had a lot of people have done different programs, whether it's like Al-Anon or AA and that kind of thing. And it's a tricky, to me, it's a weird space that they're like, well, you're not supposed to say, but I think I'm happy and proud to sort of say like, this thing really helps me. So if you're curious about it, do it.
Yeah.
But I did do Al-Anon, and that was a big discovery for me after my marriage ended, that I was like, man, I feel like I'm doing a lot of things to myself, and I'm doing a lot of things to my world, just in how my brain sees things. So that's been a really helpful place to go to, and set of tools and mantras, and that, they come in so many different forms, and there's whatever you gravitate to, that sort of gives you some tools that you can be like, okay, calm down, reset, do this, great. And for me, this is the one that works really well. So
I think it's really awesome that people can bring it up, because you're smiling talking about it, and everyone needs help in their own way. And if they can find the right thing for them, then to me, that's like a mission ticked. And you mentioned like mantras. Is there a mantra that you hold, if you want to share, that you like hold like close to you?
No, I mean, there are certain slogans that they have that in the moment, outside of the moment, they can sound just like a hokey coffee mug that you don't want to be holding, but in the moment they're great. But it's, it's like, first things first, which basically just says like, don't look at everything all at once. Just deal with the issue at hand and then move to the next. How important is it? That's another one that I think it's good for me because I can sort of catastrophize. And then I just have this like little prayer that I sort of say when I'm nervous or anxious or sort of feeling myself, I don't know, just kind of vibrating in the wrong way. I'll just ask my higher power. I'll say, be my thoughts, be my words, be my ears, be my heart.
Oh, you're speaking my language, so I absolutely love this stuff. You look sometimes?
And I used to hate. I used to make fun of this stuff.
Yeah, so was me.
Totally.
Yeah.
Because there was, I mean, when I was younger and stuff, my version of control and power was largely humor, you know, and a lot of times humor is very attacking, and it's sort of like taking something that maybe you're scared of or speaks to you and kind of like turning it on its ear or shaming it or whatever. And I think I did that to a lot of things, probably unconsciously, because I was like, I'm scared. I feel uncertain, you know, I feel unsafe, but I'm not going to let you know that.
It's a real journey. When you sound similar to me, I was very, let's say, skeptical. I'd laugh at it, blah, 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 all of those things. But then when you finally connect with it in your own way, because everyone has a unique and very like personable experience with this, it's kind of crazy to see the results that if one wants to embrace it, it's just like phenomenal. We've had so many people spoken to outside of the podcast as well, and you see like, I didn't believe in any of this, but wow, it's really shifted my thinking, or I'm so much more able to get out of slums, so I can shift my mindset. And you gave a few tools as well. When you were first going through these programs, was there an acceptance towards it, or were you like, I have to just make a change and we'll see what happens from it?
I think there's an acceptance towards it, because I mean, the irony is it was my ex-wife who got me into it, because we split up and we co-parent. And so we, you know, I would see her frequently, and over, you know, the course of after we got divorced and stuff, I was like, you seem better. Like, you seem sort of back to how you were way in early dating days and stuff. And she's like, yeah, start doing this thing. And she's like, you should check it out. So, and, you know, and I went to a meeting and I was like, I'm not into this. And then I had a relationship kind of go south, and I went back and looked at sort of like the list of qualifying tendencies and traits. And I was just like, okay, I'm like 9 out of 10 of these things. So,
oh, wow. Sorry for cutting you out. I'm not going to comment on your ex-wife, but I think it's really cool that you can listen to your ex-wife in that moment, because regardless of how good or bad one's relationship is, it's very hard to listen to someone when you're going through a stressful period like that. So that's a huge credit to you to be able to take that on.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, my perspective with my marriage, I really didn't want to, I didn't want to feel like it was a failure, you know, or I didn't want to see it as a failure, or to sort of say, you know, because that would be kind of pronouncing like, yes, 12 years of my life with this person was a waste of time. And so because that nullifies me, that nullifies her, that nullifies the beautiful child that we had together. And so I really do think that the fact that we came together, we made this amazing person our daughter, it didn't work out, but out of that, we both discovered that we needed to do some healing from some family trauma. That to me means I was supposed to be with this person for this part of my life, you know, and continuing on, she is a part of my life in a certain way. So it feels nice to include it, as opposed to be like, screw it.
Take away from the victim mindset as well. But
yeah, exactly.
That is so cool. I say that, but I'm not always in the moment it can be very hard, because I don't think, if we're talking about
Mhm.
failure, for example, and I'm unqualified to talk about marriages, but you've learned so much, whether it was positive or negative. You obviously, it was way more positive. I wasn't in your relationship, but I know that. And in
You were the
terms
problem.
of yeah, but in terms of what you've been able to create and live your life, like there's so many lessons that you've learned. And then even saying like it brought you to a moment where you could kind of like rediscover aspects of yourself. To me, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I know there's a whole journey there and we don't need to get into.
Yeah.
But I think that's really awesome, because you're right, it validates, and you can't really live life thinking like 12, 15 years was a failure. First of all, it's not, because you've learned so
Yeah.
much. So I think that's a really refreshing, positive, and accurate take.
Oh, good. Thanks. And to your point, it didn't just happen. You know what I mean? There was a ugly, climb back out of the mud pit kind of feeling to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember at one point, early when we were getting divorced and stuff, she said, "We will just be a new kind of family," and it made me so fucking mad. I was like, I am not ready for you to say that kind of like woo-woo statement to me. Like right now, I'm just pissed off. And then later on, I was like, yep, you're right. We are a new kind of family.
That's a credit to you, because divorce is the most stressful thing someone can go through, and you're smiling, talking about this lovely lady, and very proud of you, Brian. But also in terms of the like ugly climb, per your words, you're going through a situation like that. You're also realizing that there's some aspects of yourself that you might not be happy with. And you mentioned like 9 out of 10. I forgot what the word was.
Just the sort of like the tendencies and traits that you might, come up with.
I think, when, very stressful. I think you mentioned there's a similar timing to like the writer's strike. There's a lot going on in your life. Like for you, you could just like kind of give up, not want to do this, not want to look at yourself, blame everyone else. It takes a special human when there's that much stress to actually say, you know what, I actually need to do something about this. So was there a moment, or did you realize that you're not happy, or what actually made you want to like dig yourself out of this?
I mean, probably a couple things. Probably the main thing is my daughter. For both of us with the divorce, and then figuring out co-parenting. My ex and I both came from alcoholic homes, and we just didn't want any of the stuff that we were dealing with to be carried on. And it is a family disease, and there's a legacy sort of timeline to it. So that was one thing. I was just I was like, I don't drink, and it's not like I abstain from it. I don't lean toward it or anything, but I recognize but I'm affected by the alcoholism I grew up with, and there's no way that she can't not be affected by having two parents that dealt with that. So my daughter, and then the other thing was, it was just unsustainable, the way I was feeling and how it was manifesting in my daily, just trying to get through the day. I was just like getting really exhausted with how much brain space and energy it was taking. And that, I think, as far as like with work and comedy and stuff, I was starting to notice that wasn't working for me anymore either. That buffer or protection or armor that it gave me wasn't. It was a great place to run to and to be in, but I could tell as I was getting older, it's like it's not, the distraction is not serving me, and I could just tell that it was going to start to kind of like, the worm was going to use some tail, or the snake, or whatever long creature you want to throw in there. So I think that was it. It was just, it really was like a mental survival thing, and just exhaustion. I was just like, I'm just exhausted with feeling shitty and thinking shitty.
Well, it's, once again, and I truly mean this, I think it's so awesome when people can identify things that aren't working for them, because that's so hard. There's so many things.
It's so hard. It's so hard because you have to work through, there's like shame, and then there's almost like a sort of confusion. For me, divorce it is a death. It is a death of a union. It's a death of an identity, as you know, as a husband, and then as a married person.
Yeah.
And then for me, it was a death of an identity of who I thought I was for 12 years, and being a little ashamed that I had not admitted. You know, I knew I was unhappy, but I was kind of like trying to muscle through it. So yeah, shame was a little bit of it.
Shame's from what I understand, the most powerful emotion, and it can make us do things that we're like, well, why are we doing this? Because we all want to be accepted. We've all got our own identity, as you said, and it can really play mind games with us.
Yeah. It can lie to you in a big way too.
Exactly.
That's one of the biggest things I've been sort of thinking about this a lot. How much anxiety lies to you, fear lies to you, shame lies to you. They're these like alarm systems that go off that sort of tell you to like evacuate the building immediately or burn the building down or whatever. And a lot of times it's just sort of like, no, somebody just like flip set the alarm off. You just turn it off again. So I've been trying to pay attention to when I sort of have a reaction of like, oh yeah, the anxiety is trying to sort of trick me right now.
Isn't that kind of like the key to life? If anyone on this planet can master it all the time, is because something's screaming at us to react in such a way. And I've heard you briefly speak about this on another podcast, and it sounds like more times than not, you're able to go, no, this is just my brain playing tricks on me. Or you take a step back and you take a deep breath, and then it dissipates, whether it dissipates 100% or even a little bit. That is so important, and I really like that.
Thanks. Yeah, I do think it's. I would love for it to be in that place where like, okay, no, and it just goes boom. But I recognize that like I can kind of get it down, 25%, and then I'm in a working anxiety range, which is a strange thing. I did also realize once I started doing program, I started to realize that a big part of my performing and auditioning approach, not by choice, was fear and anxiety was my motor,
Yeah.
And I just was like, oh, it's kind of nerves and stuff. But after a while, when I started to sort of be a little bit better at sort of observing what I was feeling and how I was feeling it, I was like, oh, this is the same feeling I would have for most work situations, most auditions. Not so much for performing. I'll take that away. Like it'll be the second before you get on stage, it'd be kind of anxious. But then once I'm just out doing improv, it's glorious. So.
Oh, okay. We're pigeonholing that. That is exactly what I wanted to hear. But also in terms of, show business, it is an industry, from what I can tell, of fear. And I've only really dabbled a little bit in it, but, speaking to awesome people like yourself, it's fear, fear, fear. And everyone's trying to like look like they're successful or whatever you want to call it. And so it's like in your face. So it's already hard when you're going through it, and then it's there. So it's like a double tackle, if that's,
Yeah. And I'm an empathetic person, and I think empathetic people, they sponge it a little bit. The vibrations kind of hit them, whether they know it or not. And so I don't know how much of that would be, in different situations. I'm picking up the fear of the director who's acting like he knows what's going on inside. He's like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing here. I do think the more I love it when people. I just worked on a show which was thrilling, and one of the things I really appreciate about him was that he would be like, he's like, was that good? That seemed crappy. Was that?
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I'm like, no, that was great. He's like, okay, I can't tell. I don't know, right? We don't know what we're doing. He was just very like, he was as messy and kind of in dialogue with stuff that he was managing as I feel like I am. And I think a lot of people are. And I appreciate that he was kind of just like, yeah, I don't know. What are we doing here?
But it is kind of like refreshing in a sense, because we all have like the bit of imposter syndrome or that negative self-talk. But you hear a name like, it's like the guy or one of the guys, and he's still, going through it as well. It is kind of liberating in a sense that we can kind of like let it go in a sense. Like, it's okay. Doesn't know what he's doing. So I don't know what I'm doing.
And I think that phrase of like, I don't know what I'm doing is an exaggeration. It's a overstatement, which is, if you boil it down, it's just like, I'm uncertain, or I feel vulnerable, but I don't think people walking around is like, hey, how you doing? I feel vulnerable.
Yes, it's a way
situation.
Can you imagine?
Yeah,
I think that's the right word. Is that at some deep level he knows what he's doing. You know what you're doing, but then there's the other stuff that come up and very natural.
Yeah. And I also started to harp on it, but it's like, I think the other thing is, one thing I really loved watching him do is like he seemed very curious about. He had a curiosity about what he was doing or how it was being done, and I think that was kind of like following up as like, I think this is what I did. Is that what I did? Is this sort of in the vein of it? And that, I love that in a work situation where people are just kind of checking in with each other, as opposed to this kind of, everyone's presenting their final product all at once and just assuming it's all perfect and stuff. It's a very messy, vulnerable, moment to moment experience that on the best sets, I appreciate that they're sort of like, they acknowledge that it's messy and mistakes are made, and that's okay. And the worst sets are the ones where there's like, we have a time clock, we have a standard, we have a way, here's what it says on the script exactly. That kind of rigidity does not lend itself to creative endeavors.
I'm happy that you bring it up. I'm hopefully selling my first script, and it's always been something. Yeah, it's very exciting, but we'll see if it happens. So I might have to cut that up, but we'll see. But I think that's really important, because to me, it's like all about collaboration, and we don't know everything, and there are people that might be going through their stuff. But if you create a space where people can feel that they can be vulnerable, I think that will overtake the work in a much more positive way. Whereas if it's very rigid, and you can speak to this a billion times better than me, but if you like say this line, get out, there's no real collaboration. You feel that, and it doesn't make, like, you're doing this because you want to have fun. Obviously you want to make money and do all of that, but you're here to play and have fun. You chose this field. And when you have those situations, I'm sure you just don't feel that great.
Yeah. And it's all dependent on the creative team, the voice, who's helming it. Like if I worked with Kubrick when he was alive, I think I would be like, whatever, 900 takes, that you seem to know what you're doing. But there are times that you kind of get in there and you can tell that the choices they're making are more, or their rigidity is fear, or another voice that's kind of coming at them, as opposed to being present to what's needed. And I think I've been really fortunate, like Armando Iannucci. I will always bring him up because he's probably one of my favorite directors ever. He did Veep, and he just had that same thing of like, it's super collaborative, super, let's figure this out. And then on this show, Peter Farrelly was the director of the Farrelly brothers, but he also starting to do drama stuff, and he had the same thing of like, the script was there, and he's like, it doesn't sound real. How can we sort of like mush this up, or this logically, I know it's written this way, but we're just repeating the same idea. So he was willing to do editing on its feet, but he wouldn't do it just by himself. He would always come to us because we were the ones inside the scene, and he would kind of talk it through with us. And I think that's how he should be doing it,
Yeah, it just sounds beautiful.
Yeah. But everybody's different. So
that's true. But you've also been in like positions of inverted commas power, and it sounds like a dirty word. You've created your own stuff, and I'm sure that you've been able to like put in your bit of how you want this to go in certain situations. So have you had to change that over time, or has it always been like, don't like pretty obvious, like don't be a jerk, like listen to the other person, or has there been a bit of a process to mastering the collaboration side?
I think coming from improv, it's innate. Like when I did my own stuff for Adult Swim, I made a point with all the different creative departments to say, I like, I don't know how you do your stuff, but there's something I like about how you do it. So I'm gonna trust you, and I'm gonna want you to bring me ideas because you'll think of things that I won't think of.
Oh, nice.
And only if I, if it's not sort of like on the mark, don't take it personally or anything. But I didn't. There was some freedom for me to sort of say, I don't know exactly, but I know when it's not what I want. And so it's that kind of in between point of negotiating and figuring it out together that I really enjoyed.
That is exactly, I came from the accounting background and there wasn't so much collaboration, and just hearing stories like that where you're still empowering someone. And look, at the end of the day, someone has the final say, but it's also feel included and to be able to like speak is just, it's how it should be in all aspects of life, shouldn't it?
Yeah, because it doesn't make any sense to create something and to know that somebody is cursing your name as they sort of work on it. They're going to bring that kind of negativity to it in some fashion. So I don't know. That is a big, conceit, or like a kind of like standard thing they taught us when we were learning improv, was just like, don't be a dick. Don't be a dick to each other. Don't be a dick in work. Just don't be a dick, because you're just going to create problems for yourself and others. And it's about sort of like, creativity is born of a simplicity and openness, as opposed to sort of having to fight through.
Definitely.
Bullshit.
I love improv, and we'll get into it in a sec. I just wanted to tap one point. What I've noticed with some people that have gone through certain programs, there's also been a bit of a fear that they might not be the creative that they thought they were, or they had to like start again, or they were worried that if they like unpack themselves, they'll be a different person. Was there any fear of that on your end, or did you think you'd be a better performer afterwards?
I think I did have it, because, and I don't think I never sort of adhered to the idea that like my suffering was what made me funny or made me interested in comedy. But I did I did notice when I was like doing, kind of really digging in and doing my program stuff, that I was like, work's really slowing down here, and I don't feel as funny in improv and stuff. And I think that was just a byproduct of that. A lot of my brain space was in a very sincere, kind of vulnerable space,
Yeah.
So I just had to kind of accept it for what it was.
And now that you've come through, let's say the other side, I don't think that's the right way of saying it, but now that you've put in a lot of time and energy into feeling better, have you noticed a difference in your performance?
Well, it's hard to say, because honestly, like, pandemic was really difficult for me, very like emotionally, mentally, unlike everybody else. I'm the only person who had a hard
but
time
it's
with
important. Everyone was going through something. I appreciate that you bring that up.
Yeah, and that is something I will forget over and over and over again, that everyone has just been through a gigantic global trauma fest. But I I started doing program, and then I got on a show that shot 2 seasons, and we were all set to do a third season, and that got canceled. And after that got canceled, I was like, that's okay. I got program, I'm feeling pretty good. But then I didn't recognize that I was really grieving it, and that it really kind of knocked me back to a state of mind where I was like, I felt really unsafe. And I think I was in that mind space while I was still kind of getting deeper into some stuff in program. And then pandemic came, and then everything just kind of went away. So at one point during pandemic, I realized, I was like, I have to be very careful that what's happening now doesn't become my new quote story that I tell about myself and tell about my life.
Interesting.
Because I started to really think, oh wow, when pandemic came, that's when my career went away, and that's when everyone forgot about me, and where I lost all my talent and I lost all my joy around it. And I did start to believe that, and it started to kind of manifest itself. And then we're having to do self tapes, which I complained to you about earlier and still complain about.
Like everyone else.
Yeah. And I was having a really hard time with it. And I think it was really important that I realized, like, oh, I don't start to say, don't tell this story to myself. Don't start to say like, this is reality, because it wasn't reality. It was just me reacting. It was just me sort of like dealing with it. But let me burp for a second. Okay, there you go.
That was a good one.
Yeah, it's a good one. It was starting to become my new story. And my story from when I grew up in an alcoholic home went through different iterations where I was like, I loved it. I honestly sort of like wore it like a cape, like I was some kind of like weird dark superhero. And then I hated it, and then I made use of it in my comedy unknowingly, and then I made peace with it, and this became this whole new thing for me where I was like, oh, okay, this feels like I'm starting to turn this into this other story for myself, and I gotta check that.
Once again, I think that's kudos to you. That's very hard. Everyone's going through trauma. There's a lot happening. Man. Work's not happening. It can feel like the world's out to get you. We're not going to get into it, but regardless of one's politics, we can hate the other side and this side hates us and blah, 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 and feel like the world's going to explode, which I don't think it's not. I think the world's actually beautiful. That's just a FYI to everyone.
I like that.
And say that again.
I said I like that one.
Oh, I thought you said okie dokie. And
okie dokie.
And there's a lot happening, and I've done this a gazillion times, and hopefully I can catch myself. Is the stories that we tell ourselves are very powerful, and we all do it, but to catch yourself even through moments, still a challenge, especially with everything that was going on. So was it a real conscious, I'm going to like sit down, analyze what's happening, and say, no, this is not what I'm going to tell myself?
I don't know. I think it was just, I never have those moments. They just kind of hit me when I'm at the grocery store or something, where I'm like, oh, wait, hold on a second, maybe I'm doing this. When I kind of actively try to like, I'm going to think my way through this, it doesn't happen. It always just hits me the side of the head, like some kid throwing fruit at me or whatever. But and then I will say, and I feel like I brought it up on some other talks I've done, but my daughter gave me the greatest perspective I had in pandemic, where I was sighing a lot and just like kind of like checking the news. I'm like, oh my God, you hear about this? Because I didn't want to hide her away from what was going on. But so I would just kind of tell her what she needed to know, but I was also sighing a lot and like groaning a lot and stuff. And she was like, will you stop doing that, please? I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's just, things are really hard. And she's like, I know things are hard. Things are hard, but this is how things are, and we have to live in it. So we have to live in it the best we can.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, 14-year-old daughter, you just...
Wow.
Yeah. And it really was just like she was basically saying like, this is kind of all we got, so don't waste it. And it really, straightened me out a little bit.
That is super profound.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm kind of speechless from
that.
Know. Yeah.
I know. Me too. I was like, and I had a little bit of like kind of guilt, or I was like, think my child just parented me. Does that mean I'm not stepping up as a parent for her?
Yeah.
So
I
but
get,
again, sometimes you just need those like little
yeah.
slaps of reality.
I've been, I've been doing that to my parents as well. And it's not like one's the parent I must always teach. Like kids are like smarter than the next gen, or we hope so, or smarter. And they have these profound advice or just things that they say. You can learn so much. They always talk about learning from the older generation, which we should, but learning from the younger generation just to see that like childlike and my God, like I've got nieces that are they're like first cousins and they're like 3 and 5 and the way that they speak it's just like, where did you learn that from? How do you know that? It's just, it's really crazy.
I mean, I think the difference is they're not sort of, and I'm not saying this in a pessimistic, like negative way, but they're not saddled with years of reality. They're fresh eyes, and so I want her to choose hope. I want her to choose a perspective that's sort of like, I mean, I don't know, I can't compare it to anything else, but I'm gonna try to make the best of this. And I will say, I in part of going back to like the story I'm telling myself, I have to remind myself also, like, things are fucked up right now in the world, much more so than they have ever been. And so I can't just be, I can't easily just sort of be like, whatever, it's cool. There might not be food or water in 30 years from now. That's cool. But I can't also live in that headspace all the time. So I don't know. How do you deal with it?
I don't have the answer. It is an interesting one. I can only control what I can control. What am I doing now? That's like a very big idea. In this moment, I've got these tasks to do, or I just meditate. That's pretty much. And I don't actually, I have a lot, but when I'm in that space where I meditate every morning. And if I didn't have that, my goodness, wow, that would be a challenge. I don't have, without sounding arrogant, I don't know how to say this, I don't get in that space nearly as much as I did. And I find, and this is no judgment or comparison to anyone else out there, that yes, there's realities happening. I still think, and a lot of people might call me a bit naive, I think there's way more, like so much more positive and beauty happening in the world. So much stuff's being uncovered. And also in terms of the fucked up stuff, which there's definitely there. I think it was always there, but we're just more aware of it. And when you're more aware of something, then you can change it. So that's my 14-year-old naive coming out, and hopefully,
if you could just get that into a soundbite, you could say then send it to shut your dad down. That'd be great.
Exactly.
But I think that is true. Like, just everything you said of this moment now, what can I control? And then, it is a lot of mindfulness, kind of like being observant of what the moment is, and not what the totality of it is. I don't know.
I don't know either. That's just what I do. It might work for some, might not work for others.
Yeah.
I did want to, before we get into Ibro, I know we've said that 100 times. One thing that's really interesting, and you glossed over it, you talked about that third season of how it didn't happen. And what I found really interesting is that, I don't know if it was the writers or the showrunners, whoever, people like tapped you on the back and said, this season, you're going to play a major part and this is around you. So you've also, that's so awesome to hear, and congratulations. Even though it didn't happen, it's still nice that they said that to you. And so you're probably thinking, oh, this is great for the career, going to get a lot of money. I've established myself, and then boom, it goes away. And you've probably also heard stuff like that in Hollywood where people say, yep, this is it. This is going to be it. And it doesn't happen. So how have you been able to cope with, I know it's a bit loaded, but how are you able to cope with that? Because you've received that probably a lot, but that third season was going to be the gold mine.
Yeah. I mean, it was going to be experientially, I think it was going to be a gold mine for me, which is honestly, as far as being a character actor, that is one thing I continue to long for is playing a character for a while. I talked to that about like leaving. He was just like, yeah, it is. He's like, it's weird. It's like hard not to be him anymore. You know, I'm having to suddenly be this other guy. But he's like, but it was great to just be one person, you know, to really do this thing for a while. So I grieved that a lot. I was really just like, oh. And then I don't know. I used to have what I thought was healthy cynicism, but I think it was just bitter cynicism. Now I have a certain amount of accepting cynicism about like what the thing is going to be, because I will say, for the most part, the stuff that I thought was going to be the thing that was going to turn into the thing it's never been. And if I kind of look at how I've done my choice of careers and stuff, they've all been from like, oh, I'm curious about this, I want to do this. And it's never been like I want to be X, I want to be sort of a TV actor, you know. I was just like, I'm interested in comedy, and then it kind of led to how can I get work doing it, and that kind of thing. So yeah,
sorry for interjecting. That curious mindset takes away from a bit of the like the fear and the hardships, because you're just like floating and saying like, what can happen next? That to me, that's quite optimistic.
Yeah, and I will reframe it a little bit, that I think for a while it was a way of keeping myself safe and not sort of saying, it took me a long time to sort of say I'm an actor or that I'm a performer. Like I had to give myself permission to do that. And I didn't do that because if it didn't work out, then I hadn't proclaimed myself to be that.
Yes.
And I played in a band, and that was just like a local sort of like indie rock band and stuff. But everybody would say like, oh, you're a musician. And I'm like, no, I play in a band, you know. And now I'm kind of like, I say like, I'm a crappy musician, but like I play music.
Did you get a record deal or something? I heard you like you got
to
record.
Yeah. It like these local like trust fund kids
you still did it.
It was great.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, and yeah. So all that stuff, I have to kind of like retroactively give myself props of like, you did something really weird and scary and just did it because it made you happy to try this stuff. And I think for me, where it, my insecurity or my self-doubt kind of took over, is when it would move from being like, I'm curious and just doing this, to I'm going to try to survive off of this, or I'm going to say this is what I'm dedicating my life to. That's where it felt. And I think that's probably that way for everybody, you know.
I agree.
It takes a lot, you know.
It is, you know, you've had a very interesting journey, and I know that you've got your arc of your story, so we'll gloss over it, so we'll keep it fresh for you. But in terms of, you know, you did photography, you were in a band, as we just spoken about, then you did photography, you meet I think Rob Corddry, and you just interject because I'm telling your life story to you. And then you meet Rob Corddry, and he's like, you're so funny, funnier than the people that I work with. You try improv and everything kind of clicks for you and your life kind of changes.
Yes.
Is that tick, tick, tick all the way?
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Did the band, working in a band, did that help with confidence, being able to perform, or was it a different type of performance?
I think so. I think it helped me. It definitely helped me know that I creatively commit to something, you know, and creatively invest in something. And it gave me an experience of, which can be a good and bad thing, but it gave me an experience of what the kind of like dopamine hit of performing can be. And I think it gave me a sense of stage presence and wanting to kind of mess with the audience a little bit. Not to sound aggressive, but like manipulating the audience or kind of like making them react to me, yeah, I think that's, and then I also, and I've said it before, like the music scene was very similar to the improv scene to me, so that made sense. That kind of landscape of people find their group of people they want to make something with, and they become this little collective, and then they're competitive against the other groups, but you're also part of a community, so you're supportive of one another and you're curious about what they're doing and borrowing from them and stuff. So that, all that stuff really clicked for me.
Oh, I think, and you've probably had to speak about this on every podcast, but you're still smiling. Improv should be taught to everyone, even if you don't want to be a performer.
Yeah.
You've talked about community, collaboration. Everyone's a team player at the end of the day. It's this positive competition in that, you want to like beat the other people, but at the end of the day, everyone that like goes fast seems to have this mentality of let's work together and how can we improve? And like, if you improve, I improve. And you don't really see that in other aspects of life. And I know, going back to community gave you a place to be with like-minded people where you could kind of like grow. I just think it's such a phenomenal system of, the yes and all of that stuff.
Yeah. And again, going back to what we were saying about like working on sets or a project and stuff, is like, I don't understand the approach where you don't want everyone to look great. I mean, if you do that, then you doubt your own ability to be great. But if you know that you're great and other people can be great, then the entire thing you're part of is elevated. Right. But the kind of ego is a messy bastard.
Yes.
Ego is up there with like anxiety and fear and shame. Really lies to you.
It's all the same. When I was first doing improv, and, I guess I came from a very competitive background. I didn't even know I was competitive. And I'm completely in the wrong as I tell this story. I thought like as in improv, you need to be funnier than your scene partner. And I would have been, I was, but I don't even know how bad I was to other people. I knew I was bad, but I didn't realize this is at the very start. I think I'm a lot better now. Yeah. And, I wanted to have higher status and beat my opponent. And that was just like old programming, I guess, from like my life before that. And then, I had some really good teachers and people kind of like helped me. I realized, you know what? I can win by losing and the other person can win and we can actually create amazing things. And I don't need inverted commas win, because losing, like maybe you're in the scene and you're like lower status or you're not, the funniest person in the room. You can actually create because it's bigger than the whole improv. It's bigger than the individual. And I thought that was so beautiful, and it's changed. I didn't even realize this until really reflecting now. It's changed my whole perspective on collaborating and working with people and allowing people to speak and be heard and knowing when to take a step back. And I literally think it's like a tool for life, even though we don't always apply it to life, but it's just that collaboration and working with someone's side is,
it's so funny we're talking about improv, because today I started taking an acting class to just get things moving again. I'm terrified of acting classes. They terrify me. So I was like, I need to do something I'm terrified of. So today, our main teacher was out, and so they had someone sit in, and she did improv exercises. And at first I was like, all right, well, I know all this stuff, no big deal. But then I genuinely was like kind of going back to like beginner's mind experience with it. And it was really nice to sort of to feel uncertain and to kind of do these goofy exercises that get you out of your head. And it was nice. It was a good experience to kind of just like, let's go back to square one. Just pretend like I've never done this before.
It's nice that you could take your ego out of it, because I know you're being very humble, but you're literally like a master of improv. You've been doing this. You worked with like the best people in the world. And there's always the ego, like, I've done this. I've been doing this for years. Do they know who I am? But I'm sure you had that. But then to be able to switch and actually play in the moment, that's also pretty exciting that you could let go as well.
Yeah. And I will admit, like, because another thing with pandemic was, and I think we were talking before we started recording, but like one of the biggest like, I guess, losses or experiences of grief I had without knowing it was that on March 13th, I stopped doing improv after doing it once or twice a week for like 22 years straight.
Wow.
It just went away for 2 years. And I did like 1 or 2 shows during pandemic, but it just went away. And that was a true hole. That was to me a musician learning that they can't hear, or they lose their hands or whatever. That would just be, it felt like that part of me had been sort of like cut out of me and stuff. So this experience today was good because I wasn't looking for like, oh yeah, I still got it and stuff. I was looking for I think feeling uncertain and a little scared, and then doing it and it turning out fine. I think that for me is a thing that I have to experience over and over again, of like, I've got the idea of what this how scary or bad something's going to be. I cross over that threshold I've created, and then I'm on the other side. That letting go experience is really, really important to me. Not that I seek it out, but I have to, lately I've been kind of like embracing that. I'm like, this is going to be really scary and I feel terrible right now. I get through it, and like, I got through that. I passed through that portal.
Well, I've been kind of awe of this, and I know it probably like comes back to like your upbringing of doing all the crazy things that you've done in terms of like photography, improv, and all this stuff. But often, and if I'm scared, I don't necessarily tackle it, and I know that the vast majority of people, but you actively decided to do this despite it scaring you, and not to take back from the grief, because I can only imagine, this is something that you've thrived in. There's a community to it. It's helped with your career. It brings you huge joy. It also activates your brain, and you get to explore a different side of yourself. And then you've lost it, which is, not ideal. And now that you're coming back to it, to really like decide to face that is also really awesome. But then to like go back and like kind of let go on top of that. Yeah, I don't really have a question, but I think that's awesome.
Thanks. I mean, it's just hearing you sort of like, unpack it or summarize it. It is interesting. The letting go is important because I'm aware of how much I hold on to, and I can feel it. I can feel it in my body. I can feel it in it kind of like slows my brain down. And so much like me starting to do program, coming from a place of just like, this is unsustainable. This is not making me happy and a hindrance to me. And if I do a data set on it, it's like, well, I've done all this stuff that keeps it in this place. I'm scared of this. I bet this will kind of like take it away. So let's get the surgery, basically. It's like, let's get the procedure done. And the procedure is, in this case, it was sort of like doing an improv show the other night with a group of my friends and stuff. And I was terrified about it, but it went great. So
that's kind of cool that, you're scared. I know that you said this, that you're scared before, but then when you kind of like start, you're good. Or at least you've been like that the whole time. I'm sure you're probably a little bit more nervous actually performing this time, or maybe you still remember it. But at the end of the day, which is what I'm hearing, it doesn't matter if you improvise or not, it's scary. We've kind of like lost certain things through this whole period. And then when you try it again, it's a little bit scary, but it's okay. Like, what's the worst that could actually happen?
And I think I have a greater understanding of the experience of hiding and ruminating, maybe from pandemic and stuff. And also I think from having with my daughter kind of going through teenage years, the idea of like, you kind of, I don't know, you can turn a small thing into a monster, and then that monster is just one of many monsters that can revisit you and stuff. So yeah, just kind of like dispelling that stuff, I guess.
Very cool. And now that you've done the improv now, do you feel a lot more, what's kind of, you've done it, you've probably been processing it. What are the insights from now that you've done that show?
Well, the greatest insight I think was, I haven't done this in a long time. I'm a little out of shape, and that's okay. It's not like, oh, it's all gone. I never, and it doesn't. It's sort of like my divorce. It doesn't erase what has existed.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think the other thing is, and I've been aware of this as I've gotten older. Like, I don't have the same ambition, fire. I have to prove myself that I used to. And I thought for a while that was like giving up and stuff. And in a way, I'm like, no, I think that's just realizing, like, I've been doing this for 20 something years. You don't want to always have to be like proving yourself, there's a great value in being like, this is my body of work and this is who I am and this is what I bring to it. And from this point forward, there will be kind of like, peaks and valleys of how that plays out and stuff.
Oh, that's like a quiet confidence in knowing who you are, which is the goal for every single person on this planet.
Yeah, and that quiet confidence, I also know will have peaks and valleys.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You're human.
Yeah, completely. I think that's the biggest thing. It just reminds just compassion for yourself, which is really hard. It is really hard because, we do say the shittiest things to ourselves, stuff we would never say to people we love.
It's kind of crazy. We all do it.
Yeah. I don't know what that is. I think it could be sort of expectations that we have ourselves or hopes that we feel like we're dashing. Because end of the day, we are our own team,
Yep.
So it's easy to yell at your sort of publicist or whatever. And so I think that's where it kind of comes from sometimes. It's like you're holding yourself accountable for failing yourself,
Oh, this is okay. So going with your, like, I would say like a forward moving mindset, and you're quite positive and you can look back at your experiences and say, you know what, I learned this, and this.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't continue with photography, or you still take photos, I believe, and you're no longer in a band. Do you look back at those experiences and be like, yep, I learned this, and this has really helped with this? Do you have insights from not pursuing those two?
I guess the insights I had, my takeaway from those two sort of creative periods of my life were that they were leading to what I do now. Because what I do now is what I have always wanted to do. I had and I always tell this story because I'm proud of it, but in second grade, I gave a speech about how I was going to be a comedian when I grew up. And I put that on the shelf and kind of kept shoving it away because of self-doubt and fear, But I think the other stuff were ways of me, those were means for me to keep exploring. That's why I said, like, I think they gave me a creative, like, literacy and an understanding of myself of how into something I can get when I'm like really invested.
Awesome. And
I think that's a really important experience for people to have around creative, or even, I don't know, athletics. Just that thing of like you give yourself over to something and exist in that space, exist in that creative state of flow or refuge or whatever. Yeah, because our brains help us and they get in the way a lot.
Yep.
And when we can kind of give it and ourselves a break and then work with our brain, it's great.
Life is a lot easier.
Yeah.
Before we do our rapid fire segment, in your words, explain the state of flow. It's my favorite thing.
Yeah. I guess state of flow to me is when you're so engaged with whatever and it literally can be a shoe shine guy doing his shoe shine thing. When you're so engaged in whatever activity you're doing, you lose a sense of self and of outcome, and it just becomes about the moment to moment experience of the thing. And again, I think that goes back to sort of mindfulness and meditation and allowing yourself to kind of drift in spaces that consciously you can't access. And so that's the interesting thing about performing, is that you are consciously pursuing an idea or a thing, and then you're unconsciously giving over to how to execute that. So to me, it's like one of the coolest things of just being able to be in a place where you're like, here we go. Wow, I'm doing that. That just happened and it's over. Great.
Doesn't it feel like a superpower in a sense? It feels like out of this realm.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I will also say, like, a state of flow to me, in terms of improv, a state of flow to me is human connection and just being in a space of joy. Because that was one thing with improv early on. I was like, oh, I've been doing improv my whole life with my family, with my friends. Like, I love doing bits. Bits is just communicating love between people I love, and it's a shared language, and we're just messing with it. And so when I do that, it's just about that, and that's the best thing. It's just like you're just doing the thing, and that's
you're radiating and you're smiling. Everyone do improv or find your state of flow. It's the best thing in the world.
Totally.
Yes, the state of the flow. Even I'm not the best basketball player. That I've done it at improv. I've done it through writing, but even basketball, for example, and I'm in like the lowest comp, but it shows that anyone can do this. That when you like hit that shot or you do that move, and you kind of feel like your body's being taken over, like in a bliss state, or I don't know how to describe it. And you're like, wow, that was cool. Yeah. And it's I highly recommend people find something that they like, because when we have those moments, it makes everything easier. And just even being able to reflect, to be like, we have these abilities to get us out and connect, like you said, or be very grounded and present. And it takes away from a lot of life stresses.
Yeah. I had mentioning sports, like I never did sports growing up, and I was really insecure about it. And I think I do have a little bit of like regret, because I think I have athletic ability that I just never pursued, And so but oddly enough, like I got really into badminton.
Oh,
when I was in photo school, I went down south and worked at a paper, and I was hanging out with my friends, and we got really into it. And then I got into it again in New York, and then I got really into it here in LA, and I love it. And it's like the potentially the dorkiest thing possible.
I think it's so cool.
It's so fucking fun, man. And it's just, it is. And I was like, oh, I get it. I get why people love sports, because this feels so great. And I don't want to turn this into a vocation or a life, but I just love doing this,
I used to, this is entirely on me, like laugh at people talking about their gardening. Mm-hmm. And then after, we've spoken about it on the podcast, but prior to that, when I actually looked at someone and see how they were smiling and talking about their gardening, I was like, wow, you love it. And I love that you love it. And now regardless of one's activities, it could be something very boring to me. But when people light up like you have, it's so interesting, because what makes that person smile and tick in a positive way, it's like contagious. It's so nice to hear and see.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. Yeah. And you have to, and I think being open to that is a good thing too. Like for you to be open to someone else's joy, because I can speak for myself that there was a time when someone else's joy about something only pointed to what I didn't have. I had that victim perspective. I had that kind of like, oh God, I will never have anything like that, as opposed to being like, oh, I could do that. I should try that. The message I gave myself was like, another thing you don't have, you know. So
I've gone through that. That's
yeah.
why. How did you shift that?
I don't know. I don't know if I could say like I shifted it by doing this. I think it was just a gradual collective kind of self-examination and, you know, getting rid of old bad habits and stuff.
I haven't spoken about this on the podcast, but I've spoken to my friend. He's been on this podcast and he's a YouTuber and he's doing extremely well. I'm so proud of him.
Yeah.
And there was that moment, and we've addressed it a few years ago, where he's like getting millions of, not that it's about numbers, but it's still impressive. Yeah. And he's, you know, getting millions of like eyeballs on his stuff. And I wasn't, well, I'm still not getting millions, but I'm doing a lot better. And I was so jealous. And it came about very infrequently in the conversation. And he addressed it, and thankfully he did it in a loving way. I'm like, oh shit, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize it's my own insecurities, has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
And it's completely changed, I hope. And I can go, you know what, their success is their success. If anything, it actually probably helps me, not in a narcissistic way. Because if they're happy and they're doing well, you know, maybe I can learn something from it. And that's really shifted my mindset, because if someone else is doing well, which is a lot easier said than done, that is only a positive. They're happy. Yeah. And if they're happy, it actually makes me happier.
Yeah. I completely have been, and I admit I've been in that jealous, envious space much more than I admitted I was. And I did so, like I said, in this kind of victim way, where my assumption was, well, I'm friends with all these people and they're all doing well, so I should as well. You know, it was illogical. And then I had a you know, moments where I was like, oh, well, they will lift me up and carry me along too. And then it became, you know, honestly, like it became a little bit of like, I wasn't even recognizing that was happening. I had this kind of conditional expectations, narrative that was going on, where I was in a negative headspace enough that I was like unable to recognize the good things that were happening and only able to focus on what was not happening, and what was not, and be negative about what wasn't happening for me. And that's such a, now I can say with relief and pride, like
cool.
That's one of the biggest things I've realized and kind of gotten better about, because that was making me feel sick, I think.
You released it.
Yeah, it's hard, man. I mean, I'm really empathetic to anyone who's kind of struggling with that, because it's so human, and it feels so hard to get out of. And it's like one of those things of, once you're outside of that, whether it's depression, envy, you know, whatever, when you're in it, it's so hard. When you're outside of it, the simplicity of it is mind-blowing, and it's hard to make sense of. You're like, what? Seriously? I just had to like see this in a different light. But that, again, that's why I think Buddhist, you know, maxims and all these like kind of like short phrases that are just like 5 words, they seem so simple and like whatever, but they are so profound, because the simplicity of it is hard for you to kind of like to accept, I guess.
It's also reiteration to the brain as well.
Like
you kind of like, there's whatever program is a negative one, and then you replace it hopefully with a positive one, and it's changing the coding, or however you want to call it. But also on what you were saying, which is really cool, is like, you know, going through that, and we all do this, is that now that you're like on the other side, is that you'll be more empathetic, more kind. You're able to see the situation. You can probably give more in a positive way to someone else. So
yeah. And
that's the goal.
Put some light on me there. I looked like I was in darkness. Yeah. And that's true. And I think what you're just saying, like replace it with a different thought, that people need help with that. It's very hard. It's very hard to do it yourself, you know. And one thing I noticed in the interview is like you were presenting it or sort of like putting it back to me in the way of like, you did this and stuff. And I think I participated in it, but I have to acknowledge that I benefited from so many other people's vulnerabilities and expressions and openness for me to kind of have a reflection back on myself. So I think anyone who's like struggling with stuff, isolating is a very safe, easy thing to do, but it just perpetuates whatever you're struggling with. So
I'm thrilled that you bring that up, and you're so right. Like everyone that's inverted commas we look up to has had help from multiple people, and we do need the support of our peers or a professional or whoever. Yeah. But you can't necessarily, and it's a positive thing. It might sound negative. We can't necessarily do everything by ourselves, and that's why we're in the world, to connect with people. And that's my preachy vibe.
So good vibe.
What we're going to do now is a quick rapid fire segment to wrap up the podcast. So the first thing that springs to your mind, but if you need time to think about it, then that's A-okay. I can't believe I said that, but I guess that came out.
Okie dokie.
What are you most proud of?
I'm going to say two things. I'm most proud of my daughter, and then I'm most proud of that I became an actor and that I'm doing what I have always wanted to do.
I'm not going to comment on them, but that's the best answer. And yeah, that was awesome. But now I'm not commenting on them. And otherwise I'll just derail them.
Yeah.
What did your family think when you were pursuing, you're in photography, and then you're in band, then photography, and then improv?
By the time I got to actor, improv, they were like, okay. There's like, okay, so we sent you to photo school and that's not what you're doing now. Now you're like, now you're gonna be an actor at age 29. You're gonna start acting. And I was like, yeah. So
was it like a defeat, or they're like, whatever, we don't care, in a positive way? Or
I think they were kind of like, yeah, I think they were just, it was regarded a little bit like, all right, well, we'll wait another couple of years when you come back and you're like, now I'm a spoken word poet, just getting ready for
interpretive dance master.
Yeah, just making it harder and harder to make a living and stuff.
Well, I know you spoke about this story, but you've also been a half mime as well, so that would have been
I wish that worked out.
Yeah. I've got tears. Okay, this is a good one. Any advice for people seeking mental health? And you're not a doctor, and so people just put that out there. But
yeah, there's an organization. There's a group of people called QAnon that I think are really, really supportive, and they have great mental health issues insight. Just kidding. I would say just what I said. The first take, if you're finding yourself saying, I can't do it, there's no hope, whatever negative constant voice that's going on in your head, know that is not true, and that it's important to get a voice outside of your own head, whether that is through program support therapy or a therapist, or even just sort of going to a trusted friend and saying like, this is what I'm thinking and feeling. Can you please give me some perspective on it? Because I think that's one of the hardest things is, again, like what I was sort of saying about like crossing over a threshold of fear. Like the hardest thing is just to kind of like put it out there. You don't want to end up with like a kind of a hoarding unhappiness. You just kind of get out there. It's very basically, I'm just like, get some help.
It's very wise, and it's very profound in so many different things. And I know I said I wouldn't comment, but that was very good.
Yeah. And I will say that one thing I do think, and I noticed this with my daughter during pandemic, I was really impressed by how much positive sort of like information is available on Instagram and TikTok with a lot of sort of like mental health feeds.
Oh,
And I was really, and she would post some stuff, and I was like, man, this is really cool that these sort of like statements that I wasn't even versed in until I was in my 20s and 30s are being passed around by like 14-year-olds and stuff.
oh,
So
that's nice because everyone always
yeah,
complains about social media, and there's positive.
I know. I think it's there's a lot of noise around in the world and stuff, but it's like if you kind of drill down,
You can find what you need. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you mentioned you're quite an empathic person. Do you have any advice for like energy protection or in terms of people that are maybe find themselves too empathic and maybe taking on too much stuff?
Yeah, I would just say give yourself the permission to step away, detach with love if you need to, because you don't serve anyone if you're depleting yourself. If you feel like you're serving someone by depleting your own energies, that creates a negative loop in relationship.
Yep.
So, step away when you need to.
I don't surprisingly like bringing up family and stuff unless if it's brought up. You brought up your daughter a lot. I heard in a podcast a while ago that she's into slime or that she's done well with slime.
That's eons ago. Yeah, many years ago. She was actually unpacking that with a friend of hers the other night, talking about like during her slime phase and what her hair looked like and how she was dressing and stuff. So
what was it? I just heard it. I think it was literally a podcast like 6 years ago, and it was just low key mentioned, and it was very interesting. Did she have like a slime business, or was she into slime? What was
she? So she, these little trends happen, and she was in 4th grade, 5th grade. She would just make, and it's when Musical.ly was an app that was going around, and then YouTube. But she would learn to make these like slimes, which are like glue and cornstarch, and then you put these additives in, and it gets all like you just play with it in your hands and stuff. If you're a parent, it gets on furniture and carpets, and you curse, and it ruins flooring.
So you're thrilled that the phase.
Oh my god, so much structural damage to my home was done, and just hundreds of dollars of like toxic waste just being dumped back into the system and stuff. Amazing. But it made her happy.
That's all that matters.
Yeah, totally.
Funniest thing that someone has tweeted about you or commented about you, or maybe a review that you've read, or anything that springs to mind?
I don't do Twitter much.
That is smart.
Yeah. I can't really think of anything. The first thing that pops in my head it's from back in my band days. And it's like we had played a song and then people clapped, and then the room was quiet while we were like tuning, and we heard these two like very drunk dudes in the back, and it was like, yeah, man, they suck, but man, they are a trip between songs. Stick around.
I hope that gave you quite confidence.
Yeah, that became our rallying cry. Like we were just like, we had announced like, we suck, but we are a trip between songs. So here we go.
What would you do if you knew you could not fail?
What would I do if I knew I could not fail? That gets into Superman territory. Yeah, I would. I don't want to get political or anything, but I would stop the trend of fascism that's growing around the world.
If you could do that, then
I know,
country, right? And liberate the people.
You gave me like without fail, so I'm like, all right, sounds like I got some infrastructure here. Let's do this.
And something within. I'm not saying you don't have this skill set, but something more within your skill set. Is there anything that's?
Oh, you mean like make a good sandwich or something? Yeah. What would I do if I knew and fail? I want you to leave in how long it's taking me to come up with the answer for this. Just dead air, just like 20 minutes of just dead air.
I love that.
I don't know. And as I don't answer it, I'm sort of like, do I not have like great ambitions and stuff? But I think if I knew I wouldn't fail, I would I'd pitch my own show and get it on the air.
Haven't you already done that before? Like a lot?
Yeah, not a lot. I mean, I did 2 specials for Adult Swim, but
that's a lot. But
yeah, I guess so. And then the other thing is like I would say like maybe I'd record an album.
Is that do you still play and perform or play?
I started during pandemic. I dug out all my stuff, and I've been like much like improv. I've been sort of like very creakily, sort of like trying to do little songs and stuff. Just and again, just for my own creative like feedback to myself. I'm like, I did that. That's cool. I like this. I think that's important.
What do you play?
I mainly play bass, but I play very limited guitar.
And what type? I forgot to bring this up. And what type of music did your band? What was like the genre?
It's sort of like is indie rock, but it was more on the kind of like garage rock, Meat Puppets. We liked this band called Camper Van Beethoven. We had like kind of humorous lyrics. So we were kind of a mess as far as like our songs were all over the place and stuff. But yeah, we definitely had sort of like a garage rock kind of like punk feel to it.
We've had your friend John Ross Bowie on the podcast. I know that he used to before. Why don't you get like all of your like comedy friends and do an album? That'd do well.
Yeah, maybe.
But we put it out there and we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if people are like, oh man, did you hear about this band of 55-year-old hackers who did it?
I think it'd be great. Last few. Any advice you want to give to people who want to any advice you want to give to people who want to try something different or new, but perhaps a bit fearful of doing so?
I'd say the advice to give yourself, I mean, for me, I really love the idea of like beginner's mind, just which I don't have a great definition of it, but it is that thing of like you're experiencing something both exciting in that it's new and scary that it's new. And you're also experiencing yourself experiencing it. And I think that's an important thing of like, if you want to try something new, just know that you will be experiencing yourself in trying something new. So if you're learning, I don't know, to build furniture, you're going to make some furniture, but you're also going to be experiencing yourself going through something that maybe you never thought you would do, you never thought you would want to do, you never thought you could do, and that's kind of a rare thing. As life goes on, things become pretty rote, So I think it's important to have things where you're like, wow, this is new. I didn't think I could do that,
That's very cool.
And I think also it's like I've been kind of fascinated with hearing about people who, died at 93, and up to that point they were still doing X, Y, or Z. All the people who seem to have long, happy lives continue to investigate something. And I think in continuing to investigate something, in whatever form it is, you're investigating yourself. Because if you get used to yourself real early, you're going to get bored, and boredom is early death, I think. So
I'm glad we're going to have to talk about that on a second one, because I think that's what I've kind of noticed as well.
Yeah.
Like passion, purpose, boredom, what is keeping the brain active. There's a lot of other things, but that's very important.
Yeah, I think that during pandemic, I got a flash of like, I was like, oh my God, this is what retirement feels like. Just having to sort of make up your day each day, I did not like it. I didn't like it. So it was an early warning call to me to be like, all right, when in retirement, don't just be like, man, I'm going to go to Starbucks and sit there for 6 hours.
And just watch me.
Yeah, watch people.
This is the last question before I ask how people can follow you, keep up to date with you.
Yep.
And all of that cool jazz. What is the one question I should have asked you?
Wow. What is the one question you should have asked me? Why do I like comedy?
And how would you answer that?
Oh, no. Now you have to answer it.
on your behalf.
Yeah. Let's see what you say.
I think you like it because it brings a sense of purpose. You feel very happy and grounded, and you can connect with people, and it brings out this like child and play-like energy in you.
Cool.
Please add to it.
I like that. And I would also add, comedy to me is as close to like modern conceptual art as you can get.
Ooh.
I think I kind of realized this because I still love like modern art, and one of the things I love and do love, and then sometimes it pisses me off, is like a lot of times they'll just do a painting to see what it looks like this way, or they'll do, they'll fill a room full of like bubbles and half-eaten Twinkies or something just to see people's reaction to it. And it's the same thing with comedy. Comedy elicits this unexpected reaction from people. And it taps into parts of our brain that we didn't think would get tickled or sort of initiated in that way. And I love that. I think that's like so cool. Oh, I have this good George Saunders quote. He said that comedy is having the truth said to you more quickly than you're used to.
Oh, I've never heard that before.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I think that's true. And I think it is that kind of like burst, that like that floodgate that happens. And in that reaction, I think a lot of times people they don't have they just laugh. They're like kind of catching their bearings and catching up with what they just heard and experienced. And then you're moving through it. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, brilliant answer. I could speak to you for a very long time, but before we go, how can people follow you, keep up to date with you, and just check out all the cool stuff that you're doing?
I am, excuse me, I am on Instagram and on Twitter as the Brian Huskey. I mainly do Instagram, occasionally do Twitter stuff. And that's it. My Adult Swim specials are still online. Mr. Neighbor's House and Mr. Neighbor's House 2. I'd love people to see those. And also they're linked to my bios if you want to watch them.
That is very cool. Thank you so much. You're a very empathic, positively vulnerable, and very empowering, light individual. So I really appreciate your time. And
thanks, man.
Thank you so much.
That was great. Thanks, dude.
I love Brian's take on the beginner's mind. There's two examples that spring to mind. The first being when Brian embraced his fears and decided to go to an acting class, and the teacher organized a series of improv exercises. Instead of being arrogant or all-knowing, Brian decided to embrace the beginner's mind, in that he came in without expectations and allowed himself to play and be in the moment. The second example Brian speaks to is that when we get older, we can become static and not embrace new experiences. He encourages us to embrace our fears and try that thing that we always wanted to do. He gives a philosophical thought that not only will we be doing something new, but we'll also be embracing and experiencing joy while experiencing our own self experiencing that new thing for the first time, which is quite the out-of-body experience in itself. He is all about experiencing ourselves, adding to our tool belts so that we can grow, learn, and be the best versions of ourselves. And I'll leave you with this quote by the Japanese Zen priest, Shunryu Suzuki. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few. Thank you for listening to the Funny and Failure podcast, exploring the deeper side of comedy.